Okay, good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining the British Empire Study Group today. Just very briefly, we are a group of men and women who have an interest in anything related to British philately, British Empire philately. It's both social and technical aspects, learning, sharing, and presenting. And better times, we meet at the Collectors Club in Midtown Manhattan and webinars like today. Why Britain? It's the home of stamp collecting. The first stamp collector was John Gray, no relative, and the first stamp dealer, Stanley Gibbons, on the Strand in London. No matter where you are, there's British philately. Between the Empire and the British Army, and the British Post Office, there is some connection with almost every piece of the planet. So, what is philately? For some, it's stamps and albums, and for others, it's postal history, rates, routes, markings. And some people, it's just history. It's postal artifacts as relevant items for historical research. So we welcome all of this. Our next meeting is December 9th with Ken Pugh and Herbert Friedman, Propaganda Stamps and Espionage Currency, Part 2. Little housekeeping. The questions will be live, but feel free to use the Q&A or chat for your questions. And following the presentation, there'll be some time for social discussions. If you'd like to disable closed captioning, please click on the live transcript and hide the subtitles. If you don't see it, click more and you will see the live transcript selection. In the upper right, you'll see a view button. This can be moved and used to change to a gallery view to see more people in the social hour. And now I'll turn it over to Joan to do the introductions.
I'd like to welcome everyone tonight. This is a really great talk and very appropriate, being that it is Christmas in December for those of you who celebrate Christmas, or Hanukkah. I think Hanukkah is this month also.
Yeah,
but it is, right?
Yeah.
So I am here to introduce Cliff Beattie and Robert Vogel. Both these men are really experts in the area of these Christmas seals, Canadian national and local. They know more about this than I ever would. They've written books. And a couple interesting things that really struck me about Cliff. He got into stamps from watching Dennis the Menace. I mean, how great is that? I mean, I never thought there was a good use for Dennis the Menace, but now I found one. We're going to let it loose on young philatelists. And I'm going to let Cliff and Robert tell you more about themselves. But with Robert, he is because he probably won't tell you, he's the president of the Philatelic Specialist Society of Canada. And he's a national level exhibitor. He's wonderful and very knowledgeable. Both these men floor me with their knowledge in this area. So right now, I'm going to turn it over to Cliff. He's going to tell you his part. And then when he's done, Robert's going to take it away, take us home. So right now, I am going to turn it over to Cliff.
Thank you for the introduction. And good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. On behalf of my colleagues, Andrew Chung and Bob Vogel, we'd like to thank you for giving us this opportunity to present to you the British Empire Study Group. And hopefully by the end of this presentation, you will have a knowledge of a little bit about the Canadian Christmas seals and also about the beauty and the design of our Christmas seals. I would like you to draw your attention to the red cross in the upper left-hand corner. We all recognize that as the Red Cross around the world, but did you know that it appeared on our first Christmas seal in 1908? We had the Red Cross on for a number of years, and then they reverted to the double-barreled Lorraine cross, which you see in the left, and it became the international symbol for tuberculosis and Christmas seals throughout the world. I'd also like to draw your attention. I've used a white background, and I've used that white background intentionally because tuberculosis in the early days was known as the white plague or white death. There was really no cure for it. In fact, in the early 1900s in Canada, it was one of the leading causes of death in the country. So with the help of Christmas seals, it provided funding for sanitariums as well as for doing research. The presentation tonight will look at the following: the story behind the creation of the first Christmas seal, the North America's first Christmas seal. We'll look briefly at the local Christmas seal because Bob will give that presentation later on. We'll look at the Christmas seal and Charity Stamp Society. I think this needs to be mentioned tonight because they've been instrumental in creating the hobby of collecting Christmas seals. We'll look at Canada's Christmas seal catalogs. We'll have a discussion on the Canadian national Christmas seals. Bob will do the Canadian local seals, and he will also do Christmas seals on Canadian postal stationery. Well, here's the man that started it all, Inuit Igloo. This is how he appeared in 1903, and this is what he, later in life, a very distinguished gentleman. It all started, he was a postal clerk, and in 1903, he was sorting mail just before Christmas one evening, and he looked out the window, and two young children, a boy and a girl, walked by. They were in rags and very malnourished. He looked down at the Christmas letters he had in his hand, and he wondered if he added a stamp to this for a minimum amount, you could raise an awful lot of money at Christmas time. So he continued to pursue this particular idea, and he came up with what he recognized that children with TB had the worst problems, and that's where the money should go. Somehow he was able to arrange a meeting with King Christian IX of Denmark to discuss his idea. I haven't been able to find out how he was able to do that, but he did. The king was very impressed with it, and he suggested that his wife, Queen Louise of Denmark, be put on the first Christmas seal. So in heart, he continued to work on it. He got the design, got it printed, and got it ready just before Christmas of 1904. And here is the first Christmas seal with the Queen's picture on it. And you note there's no Red Cross or any Lorraine Cross on the first seals. It was an instant success. They sold 3.75 million seals in that first year. And when you consider there was only 2.5 million people in Denmark at the time, that represented 1.5 million, or 1.1 for every man, woman, and child in the country. I think it was such a success because the royal family was very popular in Denmark. And here was the second seal. It's rather interesting. It is of a boy and girl. I think they're looking a lot better than what Enard's seen in 1903. And the third seal, here we have the king picture appears on it. This nice looking building here, after 6 years of selling Christmas seals in Denmark, they raised enough money to build this sanitarium. It is now actually a luxury hotel in Denmark. It has a much better fate than most of the, I believe, the sanitariums in Canada, that most of them have been demolished or in very, very poor condition. The idea of Christmas seals quickly spread. It went to Iceland, Finland, and Sweden. And before long, in 1907, it crossed the Atlantic. This lady, Emily Bessett, was approached to raise $300 for the TB sanitarium at Brandywine, Delaware, and needed money to keep it operating. She remembered the article about Denmark's having the Christmas seals. So she decided she'd do it. She created her own Christmas seal. She had it printed and distributed. And here you have the Red Cross on it. And it was so successful, she raised $3,000 instead of $300. Canada wasn't very far behind. In 1908, the Muskoka Sanitarium issued this seal. You'll note the red cross in the middle. This received a lot of publicity across Canada. It was interesting. It had traveled all by the newspapers, of course, and money came in from all parts of Canada, and they raised a total of $6,114.25. I'm amazed after 100 years, we have still the exact dollars and cents. I don't know, you would have thought that would have disappeared, but it didn't. I won't go into any more detail on the local seals, as Bob will discuss that. The Christmas Seal and Charity Seal Society has been instrumental in promoting the hobby of Christmas seals. They're a nonprofit organization. They issue 4 newsletters each year in full color. There's articles on both new and old seals, and there's a major mail-in auction as well. It was established in 1931. And the main thing, what they have done is publish catalogs. They started publishing in 1936. The gentleman who created the first one was Mr. Dick Green. And a lot of Christmas seal catalogs are now known as the Green's catalogs. Here are some early Christmas seal ones from the catalog, Green Catalog, National Seal on the left, and the Green Catalog for Seals of the World. And this is where the initial information regarding Canada's Christmas seals, both local and national, are included in this. There's some 22 pages of Canadian material in this particular catalog. Well, here you have the updated version of the Green's catalog. It's local, is print and provincial. We recognized early on that we needed to have better quality pictures to show the different seals that have been created over the years since 1908. And this was just published in 2020 as the latest version. Here is the National Christmas Seal Catalog that Bob and Andrew and I worked on. It's just been released, and it has some 173 full color pages as compared to 9 pages what was in the Green Catalog. Here we have the catalog relates to Christmas seals on Canadian postcards. Bob will talk about this. If you have these, depending on what you collect, if you collect everything, well, you may need all 3 catalogs, but if you just collect certain areas, you may only need one of the catalogs. But fortunately, we now have catalogs that cover pretty well the breadth of the collecting. We're also fortunate to have another catalog. This gentleman created this one. He covered all of the Cinderella stamps and seals from all organizations, a massive undertaking. It also includes both the Canadian national and local seals. Now we'll go into the Canadian national Christmas seals starting in 1927. You will notice on the left the red Lorraine cross, which was used up until 2016. In 2016, the Canadian Lung Association decided that the Lorraine cross represented tuberculosis. And since they now deal with all kinds of lung diseases, they've changed the symbol to breathe, and in French, respire. I think a lot of collectors are not happy about the new symbol. They like the Lorraine cross, but there's always change. So here we have the first complete sheet of 1927 English. From 1927 to 1951, sheets were issued in both French and English, and from then on, it was bilingual. The first 4 years, we borrowed design from the United States, and then for a period from 1931 to 42, we designed our own, and then for some reason, from 1943 to 56, we went back to using US, and then from then on, we had our own. Here we have the French National Christmas Seal, and you may not see it. I don't know how it shows up in your computers, but this is the difference is the words Bonne Santé. that appear on each seal. The French National Christmas Seal sheet is one of the rarer items. And the reason is just because there wasn't as many printed at that particular time. In 1938, they created these booklets in both French and English. There are panes of 10, and there's 10 sheets to each one for 100 seals. They were both in French and English. However, in 1941, it's only in English. There's some controversy of whether or not this is a national seal or whether it's a local seal. So me and my colleagues, we solved that problem. We just put it in each catalog. So it's in the local as well as the national. This is a complete booklet of this 1941, maybe the rarest item in the collecting of Canadian seals. In 1957, something happened. Up until that particular point in time, there was usually only one seal on a sheet, or in case of 3 years in 1943, 54, and 55, there were 2 seals. So up to this point, you didn't have to collect a complete sheet. All you had to do is collect 1 seal or 2 seals, and life was real easy. But in 57, that all changed. And from now on, you have to basically get complete sheets in order to get all the seals that have been issued. In 1958, the Lung Association did an interesting thing. They wrote about information about TB in Canada on the back of the seals, on the gum side. It reports that there is 40,000 active cases. There were 14,000 people in sanitariums, and there was 9,095 new cases were reported in the 1957. So it's an interesting area to collect. And what makes it interesting is some of the different printings ended up different lines of print. So it's another area that you can collect if you really want to dig into the detail. Here we have the 1959 seals, the nativity scene. What happened here is an interesting thing. We ended up with control numbers for the first time. And they're little numbers. And if you look at the bottom right-hand corner, you see the number 1. This maybe shows it better. If you look at the number 2, they appear in different parts, different seals. And you can get up to 10 different sheets in 1 year. They did this for 4 years. And I must thank Bob and Andrew for figuring this out, because I didn't figure it out, they did. And it's all listed in the catalog. So if you want to really get into collecting and get all the seals, well, you have to have those control numbers. The next few slides will just show you, excuse me. The next few slides will show you some of the unique designs that we have had on our seals. Here we have all of a map of Canada in light blue, and with the different symbols in that particular area of the country. Here we have Mother Goose theme. This was popular with the kids when it came out. Here we have 2 different sheets in 1966. The gold sheet, we believe, is a proof sheet, was maybe a progressive proof. It was never issued. The actual issued seals are the silver ones, and the gold ones, of course, are worth more money than the silver ones. In 1967, Canada celebrated its centennial, 100 years of Confederation, and the Lung Association did their part by putting on this sheet, and I don't know if you can see it, but you have the number 1 in white, you have the 0 and the 0. So it makes for an interesting 100th anniversary of Canada on Christmas seals. They did the same thing here. It spells Noel. The N and the E show up really well in the green. The O and the L don't show up as good. They should have changed a different color. This is my favorite Christmas seal sheet of all. It is the Inuit Igloo at the bottom with the northern lights at the top and Eskimo carvings in each one of the seals. A typical Canadian scene, children out playing, skiing, tobogganing, just playing in the snow. And then in 1977, they came up with this different format. They're in sheets of 60 and 30. The 60 sheet is really a problem because it doesn't fit into proper albums, but so it is a problem, but they did this for 3 or 4 years. Then in 1982, they came up with this new format of 24 seals, and they continued that for a number of years. Here we have the 2 sheets that were produced to celebrate Canada's 100th anniversary of issuing Christmas seals. And here are some of the different formats that they have used. There's 3x5s, there's 2x5s, and 3x4s. And here you can see the change in 2016. The Loren cross is no longer on the sheets. You have breathe at the top and respire at the bottom of the Christmas seals. In 1992, the Lung Association produced spring seals for the first time. This is an interesting area. It gets away from the winter scenes and it adds some real color. I'll show you a couple examples. You have flowers, you have birds on them, you have butterflies, you have bees, insects. It's a real nice area to collect and interesting from the other. Also in 92, they started to issue Country Hearts and Valentines, which were issued in February. This is an interesting area and we can likely use people's help. The reason for that is that various provinces issued these as well as the Lung Association. Some years they issued, some years they didn't, and different provinces use different designs. We have tried to list as many as we've identified in the national catalog, but if anybody has any new ones, we'd certainly like to hear of them and add them to the existing catalog. They use stylized hearts. They're colorful. These ones have some stylized birds and some more stylized hearts. Just another area to go along with spring seals and the national seals. And the Lung Association over many years issued a number of different things and they end up now they're collectible. When you used to receive your milk at the door in a glass bottle, well, they put these milk collars on with the Christmas seal to promote Christmas seals. And then they did package inserts in both French and English. And they also issued bookmarks. This is a window label. It's about 5x7. It has glue along both sides, and these were put in the store windows so people knew that they were selling TV seals there. And in 2002, fast food outlets started to sell these, and it was a way of raising money. People would buy these for $1 or $2. And they also started in 1983 to issue panes of 6 gift labels. It's another area of collecting. I thought I would touch on the similarities between Christmas seals and stamp collecting. If you happen to be a person who collects proof material, well, you can collect proof material here. You can collect progressive colored proofs, PCPs. You can horizontal pairs in perf between. You can get the Detpesh perforated proofs. You can get wide gutter strips. You can get imperforated printer's marks. Now, most of these, to get these, they're in the early years. The later years don't have, some years have progressive colored proofs, but most of these appear in the early years. If you happen to collect stamp errors, you can collect errors in Christmas seals as well. Here we have the missing red in this 1937. There's Miss Perf, it's on the horizontal. Double printing of the reindeers. Here we have offset printing on the back of these 1948 Christmas seals. This is an area that of die proofs. There's lots of die proofs in stamp world, but not very many in the Christmas seal world. As you all know, Christmas seals are not to be used as postage. Stamps are for postage, but some people do put seals on. And here you have an example of a seal, 2001, that was canceled and went through the mail. And here you have one that was canceled, but unfortunately the post office caught it and charged 10 cents postage due on it. Sometimes they go through, sometimes they don't. This is the last slide. And this is a 1937 national seal that is tied to this tin can mail at Nyaku Island in Tonga. I think likely a lot of the stamp people in the audience will recognize tin can mail. I understand that the ships could not land at the island, so the islanders had to go out to the ship, the mail ship and supply ship, and they would then put the mail in a sealed metal container and then bring it back so it didn't get wet. That is the reason why tin can mail came about. A couple of people, I think, got into the business of making cachets, and as you can see, this is stamped everywhere. It's a rather interesting seal to have gone all the way to Tonga and back to Canada. I hope this presentation has given you some insight into the Canadian national Christmas seals, and you appreciate some of the beauty of our seals. I will now turn the presentation over to Bob for do the local seals. Thank you.
Welcome, everybody. I'm the second half of this trio. I say trio because Andrew Chung, our other colleague, couldn't be with us tonight because of another commitment. It's his mother's 89th birthday, and he's a sole caregiver, and he felt it was in his best interest to look after her, and I agree with him. I want to talk about the Canadian local Christmas seals. Cliff showed this earlier. It's, and I don't know what happened to the top bit of his catalog, but it disappeared on me. This is the front cover of his catalog. He didn't mention that when he showed the, when he talked about the various catalogs, but Cliff is the main man behind this catalog. He's the editor. He accepts scans from all over for people to contribute, and he's done a wonderful job of it. Throughout this presentation, you'll find different spellings for the various sanatoria. Sanatorium, Sanitarium, or Sanatorium. They're just spelling alternatives. They all mean the same thing. This is the first sanatorium in Canada. It was opened in 1897. It was the third sanatorium in the world. It followed the Trudeau Sanitarium in the Saranac Lake in the Adirondacks. This is a view of it in around 1900, just after it opened. This is, Cliff showed this seal earlier. I like to collect them used on cards. This one is tied, but just barely by the split ring cancel. Sorry. With the success of Christmas seals in Denmark and the US, during 1908, Canada was soon to follow suit, with the Muskoka Hospital being first. These seals were sold to raise funds to help offset the cost of running the hospital. This first seal came in 3 different varieties, just the same as stamps. Came from a sheet stamp, or coil perforated vertically or perforated horizontally. The coil stamps came in strips of 10. That's why you see the straight edges up here on the top, which would have been the end of one of the strips. Another one, early one in 1908, was the Hamilton Mountain Sanitarium. This seal was used from 1908 to 1913 with minor variations in the perforations. Some were perfed, some were rouletted. Note the similarity between the 1908 US Christmas seal, which I have in the inset down there. This copycat thing is noticeable in many Canadian seals in this period. This is the Hamilton Sanitarium in 1910. Shortly after it opened, the cards were produced and sold in the sanatorium. Not to be left out, the Canadian Red Cross got into the act selling seals also to raise funds. This is from Victoria. I don't know what hospital it might have been in aid of, but they might have just contributed to hospitals all over the place. The Winnipeg, Manitoba Convalescent Hospital, 1908 seal. This is a little tougher to get than some of the other ones. Sorry. I thought I had a slide of that, but I don't. Slide 12 is the London Free Sanatorium, Canada, of course. The 1909 seal. And here's a view of it. This London Sanatorium name changed to the Queen Alexandria Sanatorium in 1910, shortly after they started issuing seals. Here's the 1909 London Free Hospital seal here. And to the right of that is the Queen Alexandria seal in 1910. You can see the similarities between the two of them. They hardly changed the design at all. This is a real oddity. It's probably one of the toughest local seals to find. Between Cliff and I, we know of 3. There's probably more around, but they haven't come out of the woodwork yet. The Anti-Tuberculosis Committee, Saskatoon, Canada, purchased a number of 1910 American national seals and had them overprinted ATBC, Saskatoon, Canada. Like I said, I bought this from a dealer in Waterloo, Ontario, and when he told me he had it, I wasn't long beetling down there the 120 kilometers to get it. It's that scarce. Here's the sanatorium as it looked in 1925 when it was opened. These are very near and dear to my heart. My main collecting interest is Berlin, Ontario, Canada, which became Kitchener in 1916. For the longest time, these seals were thought to be American. There's a number of towns in the US called Berlin, but unfortunately they weren't. For the longest time, they were thought to come from possibly Berlin, Wisconsin. In May 1989, John Denoon Jr., the guru of Christmas seals, wrote in Lynn Stamp News, "I have found Berlin, Wisconsin on a modern atlas, but unable to locate Berlin, Ontario. I dug up an old pre-War I atlas, though, and located the town. Today, Berlin, Ontario is known as Kitchener." But that's another story. The blue seal on the right was the first to be discovered, and the red seal was located later. Note the reworking of the 1913 seal to the 1913-14 seal to the 1915 seal here. You can see where the 3 has been worked to a 5. This is the first sanatorium in Kitchener. It opened up in 1916 as a Freeport military hospital to serve the soldiers coming back from World War I with tuberculosis. The name change was Freeport Sanatorium in 1920 when civilians were admitted. The date for the name change was the 1st of September 1916. I got a kind of a spelling error there. It was a very controversial name change, but like I said, that's another story. The Moat Hospital in Kingston, Ontario, 1913 seal. This one is used way out of period. I think it's 1916, but it's a very scarce seal as well. It's in poor condition because it was overlapping the card, and you can see the top of it's a little bit damaged. The hospital opened in 1912. This seal, like I said, was opened or issued in 13. The seals were issued by the municipal chapter of the IODE, the Independent Order of Daughters of the Empire. The hospital closed in 1925 with beds for TB patients being maintained at the Kingston General Hospital. In 1945, the Onagawanda Sanatorium was opened in Kingston, even though this never mind. Okay. Another unusual one with the buffalo on it. This is for the tuberculosis crusade in Manitoba from the Ninette Sanatorium. Shown here is a 1911 seal on the card with a gift tag, address label. I came in sheets of 20. I guess they were in a booklet as well. And alongside to the right is a tag day medal with a ribbon and the coronation medal on it. Here's a view of the Ninette Sanatorium, which opened in May 1910. It still exists today, but it's in very bad shape. There's 3 pinbacks that were used for successive tag days. The last 3 slides are from Cliff's collection. First one is from the Royal Institute in Montreal, or Royal Edward Institute, sorry. This is a 1921-22 seal, also used on a date in 1927, but who really cares? It's tied nicely with a via airmail hand stamp, and there's a view of the hospital as it appeared when it opened in 1909. Vancouver General Hospital, the Girls Auxiliary seal. There again, it has a lot of similarities to the U.S. seal in 1908 as well. Lastly, the Halifax County in Nova Scotia 1909 seal, beautifully tied. There was no sanatorium in Halifax that time, but shortly after they built one in Kentville, Nova Scotia. It opened in 1904, and this is how it appeared in 1905. That was the end of my local seal presentation. Now I'm going to get into just a few slides on some of the Christmas seal postal stationery cards. When I first bought this, the first edition was produced by Art Class, and when I bought it, it's just a fantastic reference book. And I asked Mike Street from BNAPS if Art was ever going to update it, because I had a few cards that weren't in the catalog, and Mike said, well, Art's not in good shape. How would you like to do it? So I had the privilege of updating it. BNAPS agreed to do it in full color. The first one was done in black and white. There's 160 cards plus listed in this. I think I added about 39 new cards in it, and 5 new discoveries have been found since this book was published in 1916. The earliest card known with reference to seals is 1915, and the latest card is 1977. Here's an early one from 1917. It's a receipt for $5 and signed by the National Sanatorium of Canada. The rate had gone up from when the card was produced, so an extra penny stamp had to be added to it. Most of these cards were issued as receipts or asking for donations. 1930, here's a same card in English text and French text. Very collectible. The French ones are much tougher to find than the English ones because Quebec being at that time the only French-speaking province, it's understandable. That's 1/10 of the population of Canada, roughly. 1941 was the first use of a Christmas seal on a receipt. 1945 was the first use of a seal printed on a card. There you can see this one's addressed to the Consolidated Whaling Corporation. So even in those days, they weren't just depending on the little guy for donations. They were after the big corporations as well. Another French and English cards illustrating a facsimile of the Christmas seal. Note the Christmas seal slogan on the card, front of the card. Like everybody else, they reuse cards. 1950 card, it was in the top left. The bottom left, you can see where they overprinted the date of 1950, the blue arrows, and reprinted or printed on it the 1951 date. I guess, like everybody else, they were trying to save as much money as they could. The reuse of an old stock card. This was the 1950 card, as you see the lower illustration. They used a block of 6 1954 seals over top of the illustration of the 1950 seal. It's just an unusual use. This is the last known use of postal stationery advertising Christmas seals. It's the 1977 Fisher issue, and it just has a little note there talking about your pulmonary function test, which was recently within the normal limits, and it's a Christmas seal service. Thank you. That is the end of my presentation.
A number of questions that have been raised in the Q&A column, and I'd just like to run past the speakers while Joan brings the crowd over to the social area. So we get well, one of the questions said, is there a catalog that you could recommend that describes the designer artist for these seals, and you know, the information on the art itself?
Really, we've got some information on the printers, but as the later issues, yes, we have information on the designers or the artists that developed them or did them, but the early ones, no, we don't. Possibly if we dug into the US records, because so many of the seals were designed in the US in the formative years, we could get that information, but I guess that's another area that we really have to dig into.
One question was raised regarding valuations of these seals, and it's a general question of whether the local ones, like the Muskoa, which you showed, was this more valuable than, say, a national seal because of the quantities that would have been produced?
Let Jeff answer that one.
Yes, the local seals certainly are worth a lot more. It's rather interesting. The prices aren't very high for them. They're worth a lot more really than what the catalog says, but that's what the prices are, and have been sort of that way for a long time. But the national seals, most of them are not very valuable.
There was an Inuit seal that showed the Northern Lights, and the question was, what year was that issued? Can you recall that one?
It was 1958, I think. I think it was 58.
Okay. And this one, I think it probably occurred to a number of people, but are spring seals, what you call spring seals in Canada, the equivalent of Easter seals in the US or in the UK?
No, Easter seals are totally separate, and there's a catalog of Canadian Christmas seals issued as well. It's issued by the, I worked on it and was the editor, and it's available through the Christmas Seal and Charity Seal Society.
So there is an Easter seal that is not a spring seal.
That's correct.
Okay.
The
All right.
spring seal is a national Christmas seal product.
Okay. Now, there are many lung associations that have apparently stopped the seal program, and the question is that occurring in Canada as well? The movement just drop out of this, or is it continuing?
Want to take that one, Bob?
Well, presently they haven't dropped out, but if you can read between the lines, I would predict in the near future they will stop as well.
Mm-hmm. It's a pity you can't monetize emails.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. We have a national association still, but I think at least 3 of our provinces have broken away from that and are standing alone.
Well, the next question, I don't recall it being discussed, but maybe it's a question, do you know what it is? What is a tag day?
Well, the closest I can come to that or explaining it, Boy Scouts have an apple day, or sometimes they call it a tag day as well. I think it would be a day that they set aside that they would maybe go around to houses canvassing donations. And if you bought some seals or gave them a donation, you would get one of these pinbacks, or like I said, that one coronation medal. That's the best I can do in that.
I'm glad to hear that answer, because what occurred to my twisted mind was that's the day the graffiti spray painters come out and tag. But
well, you know, that could happen now maybe, but back then, no.
Then the other question is very generic also, and I'm sure that this has happened, but is there a general effort to inquire at the various archives of these organizations, if they even are still extant? Because a lot of times, a lot of the information that you'd be looking for might be in their archives. And I judge from your faces, yeah, the ones that are around we've checked into.
Well, the National Lung Association did have quite a large supply of Christmas seals from various years, but they sold that off 20 years ago now. And so there's, they don't, most of the ones like here in my province of Saskatchewan, they really don't hardly have any back archival stuff on the seals. It's not too important. They get rid of the seals sort of at the end of each year. I guess it's a storage problem, and so they get rid of them. It's a problem.
Well, and I think that's the question.
Just to add to what Cliff was saying, a number of years ago, I visited the old Sanitarium in Tranquille, British Columbia, which is still standing in not very good repair, but a consortium has bought it. They want to turn it into sort of a community that stands alone, growing their own food and stuff like that. And they were quite intrigued when I told them about Christmas seals that were, there was only one issued from that sanatorium, and I think it was 1927, but they were very intrigued that it had happened there.
Well, one scholar has asked regarding the very first of your slides, Bob, about why all the different versions of the spellings for sanatorium. Is it because it's quite remarkable. I don't know why that word has so many spellings, but you know.
Well, you know, when I first investigated or talked to people, some said that one was an American spelling, one was a Canadian spelling or a British spelling, which we do have a little bit of a language problem there between the two countries, but that's not true because the seals themselves, I tried to spell it on the slide the same way it was spelled on the seal.
Okay.
I don't know the difference.
Just the way it is, yeah.
Just the way it is.
Well, I once looked for a British American British dictionary, and I stopped at a large bookstore in London and asked for this. And they went to their computers and said, no, there isn't any, like a proper dictionary. There's like joke books, but
Yeah.
and they suggested, well, if you want it, why don't you make one yourself? You know, just 10,000 words. Never got around to it. At any rate, I think that's all the questions we've had on the Q&A board here. And I think now it's time to go to the social room. And Joan, can you hook it up so that everybody can see each other and we can have an open discussion? Okay.
Would help if I unmuted. So I'm bringing people over. So just please put your cameras on and start chatting. And if you want to see the grid view, if you go into view
Just doing chatting
and
now.
you put it on grid,
Just
you
chatting.
should be able to see everybody. But that was a fascinating presentation. I'm bringing people over as quickly as I can.
I just want to give a shout out to everybody who's from Europe and staying up so late to watch it. And
I think, Robert, you're on mute.
oh,
No.
no,
Oh, that didn't help.
I was watching people as they were coming in line as well, and I was very impressed in some of the locations. Had somebody come on from Thailand, Europe, all over the US and Canada. I'm very impressed.
This is worldwide.
yeah.
And Christmas seals are issued in just about every country of the world. If you
Yeah.
wanted to start a collection from your own country, go for it.
Any of the
Where would-
communist countries, like, you know, like the old
Uh,
Soviet Union?
China.
I don't know for sure, but I wouldn't be a bit surprised
I think China.
in the early days anyway, maybe not now.
Yeah. in the
Where
early
would
days.
one go to look for the artists?
Probably the American Lung Association, if they have archives.
Yeah.
No, this is the Canadian one, the Inuit
Yeah,
one.
go ahead.
I have no idea, to be honest with you. I don't know if Cliff's got an answer for that.
Well, I know that most of the early American ones, the seals which we borrowed the design from, they have a pretty good handle on who created each one of those particular seals. And the Christmas
It's in
seal
the catalog.
has a lot of that information.
It's in the Scott catalog.
I'm only interested in the Inuit one, and the Scott catalog does not have the artist. I think they have the designer, but there's too many pieces of art in the sheet that I would like to be able to recognize and find the artists for.
For each one of the Inuit carvings.
Wow.
Yes,
Oh, I think that would be a major undertaking, but
it's a place to start, though. I just need one place to start.
The silver star and the gold star particularly, you almost don't want to break the sheet up because it's so unified.
yes, yeah, you have to have it all together. Like I said, really from 57 on, you really needed to have, you have to collect by sheets to get all the various
That's right.
combinations.
They did.
I can't.
Cliff, I have a question about the catalogs. Where can they be obtained?
The local Christmas seal catalog is sold by the Christmas Seal and Charity Seal Society. That's how you can get it. And Bob knows how to get the other ones. I don't have the address here right now, but we could get that and post it where.
You can get everything from the Christmas Seal and Charity Stamp Society.
That would be those that you were involved in too, Cliff?
Yes, yeah, I've been involved in creating the local one.
Yeah, okay, great.
Yeah, the national seals that Cliff, Andrew, and myself produced is available from BNAP's publications. And if you Google longleyauctions.com, Bill Longley is the agent for selling all the BNAP's books. The book on the postal stationery is also a BNAP's publication, and it'll be available from Longley Auctions as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had a question on the, I noticed that the United States didn't have very many semi-postals. Canada doesn't seem to have, smaller countries seem to really go out for the semi-postal.
Yeah. right.
Why is that
They do.
why is the difference there? Why the difference?
You'll have to ask Canada Post that question. They're the ones that produce our semi-postals. I think we've got up about 21 semi-postals, starting with the Olympic stamps back in 1974. And every year we issue a semi-postal for the Community Foundation, where 10 cents off of every stamp you buy goes to the Community Foundation. But Canada Post is the people that control all our stamps, basically.
Can I be heard? You mentioned in your introduction, Cliff, that you were going to mention a few dealers in Christmas seals.
Well, the main one is John Danoon,
Right.
Senior, John Danoon, Junior.
He's the main, without a doubt.
They're in Columbus or in Ohio. I don't have their address right off.
How do you spell his last name?
Danoon, D-E-N-U-N-E. If you were
Oh,
to,
yeah, right.
if you Google that, it'll come up and it'll go to their store. They've got seals to no end.
And they're very reasonable when you buy them from the Danoons. They're probably the best or fairest dealers around.
Okay, thanks.
They're very good dealers. There's no doubt about that.
So I'm wondering if you folks are familiar with the labels from Botswana in Africa for tuberculosis.
No, unfortunately, I'm not.
No,
Okay, well, I'll send. I'll get an email address and I can send you some information on them because they did a bunch back in the '60s.
That's interesting. Like I said, almost every country in the world, barring maybe the Iron Curtain countries, produce Christmas seals because it's a wonderful way of raising funds. If I could just get back to that lady that was asking about the Inuit carvings, a little anecdote about that. The Hamilton Mountain Sanitarium, for the longest time, did take some of our Inuit people with tuberculosis and sent them there for a cure. And in their archives, they do have a number of carvings that were produced by the patients while they were there. I've yet to see them, but one of these days I'm going to visit Andrew. We're going to go over. I think they're housed in the university or McMaster University in Hamilton now.
Oh, thank you.
I guess we'll drop out.
Yeah.
I think we'll leave this one.
It was so, you've been talking about tuberculosis. My familiarity with seals is polio, which is the Easter, the Easter Seals campaign for America. Was it not a focus in Canada, polio, or was that just what I've seen?
well, the Easter seals that are issued in Canada, a lot of that went for polio. That was sort of the main driving force initially. In fact, a lot of the early seals show children, with braces on their legs and crutches from polio.
This presentation from Cliff and Bob is totally out of my field. My interest is military centered and occupation roles. However, I did notice that the seals were issued during wartime. Have you any idea of what sort of percentage is available on the market that's censored? From my own point, I have seen very, very few. What's your feel on it, Bob and Cliff?
Well, I've never seen a censored cover with a seal on it, to be honest with you. Most of them were sent locally. You'd have to get probably a seal coming from Europe to Canada or from Canada over to Europe to get the censorship on it. But I have never seen one. I do collect the national seals as well as the local seals on cover, and just hasn't happened.
In the newsletter that's issued by the society, I have seen a couple of times where there's been censored seals, and they're U.S. So there is some, but I have not seen any in Canada.
In 40 years of dealing, I can count on one hand the number that I've seen that are censored. So the percentage is very, very low. But having said that, the presentation that I've just seen and enjoyed is fantastic from my aspect, and indeed from an aspect of people that are collecting seals. I've never seen such a accumulation, so to speak, of such a nice material. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. On a note, I think in the UK, and during the Second War, with the paper shortage, the UK was supplied with Christmas, excuse me, Christmas seals from Canada, just to save on paper. So I'm not sure exactly the years right now. I'd have to look back in my notes, but that's something for you to look for maybe as well.
I think that was the reason why they issued when they issued the booklets in 1938 to 1941. I think it was sort of to save on paper, but they also issued complete sheets of 100 during that as well here in Canada. So I don't know if it didn't save any paper because you produced 2 different issues for each year.
Yeah.
I have a number of censored covers from Scandinavian countries going into Germany during World War II. They're available, but you have to really hunt for them because a lot of the listers on eBay and what have you don't indicate that there are seals on it, and you have to enjoy the hunt to be able to find them.
I'm looking for an exhibit of those, maybe at Oropex, Rob.
If I had 16, I'd put them in. I found 5 this year.
Wow.
But it's a very slow, methodical, mostly from Finland and Sweden.
Interesting.
When I was sending out more Christmas cards, I would use seals on the same envelope as a regular postage, usually holiday themed, when I was sending out the cards. Is that something you see?
Yes, you do. The way our post office works, they're supposed to be on the back of the envelope. The post office in 1913 came out with a ruling that they were not to look like postage stamps, and they were supposed to be on the back of the correspondence. That's what makes them so much fun, finding them on the front of a card or a cover, tied.
Just out of curiosity, if you found a vintage card that's not been in print for a long time, you know, it's got the cover with the stamp and the seal, and you got the vintage card, is that actually a more attractive package?
Well, that's the way I like to collect things. I like to get a picture of the sand as well. Cliff's catalog with the local seals, he illustrates many of the sanatoriums across Canada. Anybody that's interested in seals, you got to buy Cliff's book from the Christmas Seal Society. It's a masterpiece. And we're hoping that this discussion tonight will raise interest for people to look in their own collections. And if they've got Canadian seals that aren't shown in our catalogs, we'd be more than happy to hear about them.
It's Scarfield here. Was the Muskoka Sanatorium the one that became the POW camp in Gravenhurst?
Yes, it did. I've got a lovely card from the Sanitarium showing the Callidare Hospital. And on the back of it in pencil is written, here's where we kept the prisoners from Germany, or something to that effect. It's not postally used, but I sent a copy of that to Sid, but on our next Thursday meeting, I'll have that shown.
Oh, terrific. Thank you.
That was just fabulous. It was. That was just fabulous.
It was fun. I really appreciate you inviting us, Joan.
Speechless. I never really appreciated the Christmas seals, and you really brought a really good light to it. I'd like to thank you guys very, very much.
Another comment I'd like to make. I heard somebody say they were shown in the Unitrade catalog. That's our Canadian catalog for postage stamps. When Andrew and I and Cliff first started this, Unitrade was going to give us 16 pages in their catalog, and that totally isn't enough. Like you said, our book has got, I'm not sure how many pages. Cliff's book is well over 100.
They're 170
pages.
176.
Okay, so that's almost 300 pages total between the two catalogs, and 16 pages in Unitrade wouldn't have cut it. It gives a brief overview of the national seals. Andrew, Cliff, and myself contributed to the Unitrade catalog for that purpose, but to do an in-depth study of it, you have to get the other catalogs. Any other questions?
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Just one question actually for Joan. When's the next meeting? Because in the run-up at the beginning, it said it was today, which it can't be.
I was hoping you didn't catch that one. It is January 13th. I am so sorry about that. It's been one of those technology days for me.
Shows we read the slides.
January 13th, and we'll see Ken and Herbert back there for part 2.
I have a question for our speakers, John. These stamps are essentially Cinderellas. Do you guys collect, or do you specialize in collecting Cinderella stamps? Or do you have other interests within the British Empire as well?
For myself, the Cinderellas are a sideline collection. My main collection is Berlin Kitchener, one town in Ontario, Canada. I collect the postal history of it, and it's It stagnates because you can only find so much material. So you got to get a side interest to keep your fingers in the hobby. And Christmas seals are a beautiful outlet.
It's a fascinating subject.
It is.
I collect Easter seals as well as the Christmas seals. So I have quite an extensive collection of Easter seals, but I don't collect any of the other Cinderellas. The one catalog I showed you, Cinderellas of Canada, there's listed there by the hundreds. I don't know how he ever got all the pictures and that, but it's a tremendous piece of work.
What separates a Cinderella from most any other type of collecting? Is it just that it's unique to you, or
I don't know. They call them Cinderellas, I guess, because it covers all of those various societies and organizations that may only issue one seal, or maybe they'll issue for a couple of years and then other years they don't issue or quit. And so I guess it just covers it. There's a society of Cinderellas, which I've never been involved with, but there is a society.
I think they're perhaps called Cinderellas because they're the poor relation of philately.
Oh.
They're not postage. However, included in Cinderella stamps are sort of revenue stamps, tax stamps, and things like this. Tax you get on, I don't know, certain places you get tax bans on bottles of spirits, or I think there's a tax ban on some cigarettes and things like that.
I think Cinderellas are basically anything that aren't postage or revenue stamps. If they look like a stamp, but they're not a postage stamp or a revenue stamp, they're a Cinderella.
Yeah.
So anything for advertising, to stamp club labels, to the seals that you've been showing tonight, they're all Cinderellas.
So the bunch of documents I got, that this one guy in South Dakota went through the OPA to get his fuel oil for his house, the car for his 37 Dodge pickup, his 87 pounds of sugar. I'm not sure what he needed, 87, the 87 pounds of sugar, and that's where it stops. That's a Cinderella.
How are you, Taylor?
I would say so, yes.
That one.
I think there's a book in
too
it.
bad.
No.
Ed, I'll answer that one. Guess what I collect too? I collect all those lovely revenues, ration things, and all that stuff that the U.S. government puts out that are not postage stamps.
Now I have to track down some personnel, the personnel who signed off on his forms at the local ration boards. I'm going to have to hit an archive, in the federal archive to get all this out.
There is some, but not a lot of records on any of that because they didn't really keep those kind of records.
They sure
Like
should have
The
a name
US
for every
State Revenue
form.
Society, the U.S. State Revenue Society has a lot of stamps that are very close to Cinderellas, like these, but they're extremely interesting.
We have a couple of islands around the UK that issue stamp-like labels. For example, there's an island in the middle of the Bristol Channel called Lundy Island, and for many years they issued their own stamps. I think there's one or two other smaller islands around the north coast of Scotland that do it as well, or has done it in the past. But they're very interesting items when you come across them.
You've also got stamp exhibition labels as well, of course.
Yes, yeah.
Lundy Island, there's a few of them in Canada as well. We call those local posts out here, but they're certainly Cinderellas.
I'm not sure if it's Cinderella at all, but the 32 Washington commemorative, it's a gateway into the greater artists of around Washington's time, because at least 8 of them, their artwork is sampled in that series.
Wow.
And there, I found a post office book that they described it and where they were being exhibited. So I figure I'm going to go track down a little bit more about those artists and where their work is seen. I'm serious those 10 stamps.
A wonderful presentation. My compliments.
Thank you.
Excellent. It's 12:30 almost in the UK, and I'm just off the dock. So I say good night to you all, and to you, Richard Moss.
Good night.
So what are we
Thank
going
you,
to get? A
John.
nice exhibit of the POW camps in Canada and in Britain with the mail that came in and went out with the German with the officers. And there's probably a real difference between the type of material you'll see from World War I and World War II, because it was just a very different world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there has been some pretty good books written on the POW camps as well, and refugee camps, internment camps. All those subjects are always interesting. It's all part of philately, and you can't do enough research. The main thing is to publish your research, because it'll be lost when you're gone if you don't.
They include the diaries of the recruiters who recruited soldiers from the Japanese internment camps for the units they sent to Europe. That perspective would really be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we have any POW camps on the schedule for this season, but perhaps we could put something on for next season. We do one a month, and we were very fortunate to book up a whole season this year rather quickly. So we'll keep that in mind.
It would be worth having a word with the guys from the Forces Postal History Society. I'm sure they could be persuaded to put on a presentation about POW camps.
Yeah, Sam Chu of our society in Toronto has got a wonderful talk on the Japanese POWs or Hong Kong material. He'd be a good guy to talk. He's has a little bit of trouble with English at times, but it's still a wonderful presentation. He'd be a guy to talk to.
Yep, good idea.
Sammy did a presentation for the Collectors Club fairly recently, certainly this year.
Yeah.
And I know Sammy very, very well.
Oh, yeah.
He's got some phenomenal material.
I agree with you. He's got material that nobody's ever seen besides Sam.
And also outside of POW mail.
Mm-hmm.
His Chifu collection is #1. He's got imperial posts of China that I guess you could retire on. Fantastic material, and all of postal history, irrespective of what area it covers, is exciting, relaxing, educational,
yes,
and we should all do more.
Yes, yes.
Fucking like a true dealer.
Yeah, well, sure.
No, I mean, we're among friends. Yeah, everyone here is a collector. It's just, I find this really fascinating because, so I always looked at Cinderellas and Christmas seals, and I really didn't consider them as, quite frankly, no offense, Chris and Bob, but I was like, all right, these aren't my first interest. And then I got your slides, and I'm like, wow, this is really cool. I missed all of this, as I was going through, as you go through a large lot and you're looking at things and you're like, now it makes me say, oh, why did I do that? These are actually really cool. So
I'll caution you though, Joanne. Canada, we're pretty lucky. We have the local seals and the national seals. In the US, there's so many organizations that issued Christmas seals, but fill your boots. It's fun.
Yeah.
I have a Cinderella that I would like to develop, but I can only have one item. It's a Japanese savings stamp from a credit union in Fukui. It's Fukui province. And I know that the credit union, it could have been a credit union. I know that credit unions were a great driver of the modernization of Japan during the Meiji period. It really mobilized a lot of people's money. And with only one stamp, I really can't talk about it. So I'd have to really scour and find more material. But it's got a lot of historic punch to it.
Mike White, are you coming to CAPEX 22?
Unfortunately, I stopped traveling in April 2016.
Oh, too bad. That's going to be an exciting show for everybody.
Well, I'm sure it will be, and I wish everybody, collectors, dealers, organizers, exhibitors, the best of fortune. However, prior to April 16, I was traveling 120 to 150,000 miles a year.
Wow.
Doing shows all over the place. And now, if I get to Bangkok, I've gone too far.
Wow.
You Skype into him now?
Pardon?
You Skype or webinar your way into these things now?
Was that?
Do you Skype or webinar your way to the shows or the meetings?
Huh?
Do you attend remotely?
I
this?
do now, but I'm not very good with computers and modern technology in general. So sometimes it's very difficult. I looked at Stampex and other visual exhibitions, but other than looking for interest's sake, the answer is no, I don't participate.
They seem to be located in places where if someone wanted to participate remotely, that could be facilitated at least on their end. Maybe not on your end is another issue, but they do seem to be in places that have the wiring.
Yeah, and I do have a half decent website, and everybody is welcome to take a peek at it. But generally, my business now is internet based and postal.
What I like about these shows is that it stimulates people to look at things which they haven't looked at before. And at one stage, while we were having this last discussion, I nipped into the other room for a minute because I thought I had got an item which was on the censored cover, but it turned out to be a war seal, which was on the back of a cover which had been sent from the States to a soldier out in the Pacific Islands. So I didn't find something of interest after all, but I would not have looked for that again if it hadn't been for this show.
Still an interesting item, and they're collectible too, those war seals as well.
The whole area of philately, be it loose stamps, be it ephemera that's got some sort of adhesive on it, is educational. It's relaxing, but it also stimulates your brain. So that ends up keeping us all healthier than we otherwise would be if we didn't have this interest.
I agree.
Yes.
Well said.
When you said stimulate, that's exactly what I thought at the time.
Yeah. So you should think of it in the future as well.
So what?
Sorry, Joan, you're
Oh,
muted.
no. Okay, I'm trying to stop the reverb. I have like 3 computers here.
Yeah.
One of the things we do with the British Empire is I always try to reach out to groups that are not philatelic. So, you know, when we did the Masonry, the Masons, the Freemasons, I reached out to some of the Mason groups. For this one, I did reach out to some of the Easter seals. There's not too many Christmas seals anymore. There were some Easter seals. But December is was a very busy time. So, you know, I tried to do that with the Victorian talk because I think it's great because people don't realize how philately is really a part of their other interests. And then they catch the bug. And I think that's what that type of thing will help grow the hobby.
Sure, we're all addicted in some degree or another, and I get a daily fix because I'm sat here. I've got, I don't know, boxes and boxes of unprocessed material, and I can sit here, do a little bit of research, go for a coffee, and generally enjoy myself like I should be as a retired guy. And I'm only a kilometre from the seaside.
Nice. Wow.
This year, this philately has been a lifesaver for me in that I'm in New York, and even if I had the resources, I would not want to get on a plane. I simply would not want to get on a plane the way the airlines are running things. They were bad before. They're trailways. I'll take a trailways along the floor of the Atlantic before I'll fly on a plane across it. It's just that bad. And one of the things is a dealer from Ukraine, from the Ukraine, sent me some stamps that I ordered, and it was just a small village coat of arms. Now, when I looked it up, there was one of the battles between when the Germans were invading Poland. The Poles had a battle with the Russians on the other side. At that, they won. So I sent it off to my friend, and he did me 3 paragraphs about how Pilsudski set up because he was so obsessed with Russia, screwed up the defenses of Poland by not responding to Germany with enough vigor. And it was like, it was just a village seal, a village coat of arms.
Yeah. The tragedy is that the way the political situation is at the moment, we might see more activity between Russia and the Ukraine.
Yeah. Wow. So I guess everybody's going to rush out tomorrow to start looking for Christmas seals.
Actually, no. I'm done up on what I can buy. I just bought some war saving stamps. Now I'm at the stage where I need to spring to try and get a $25 war savings bond to finish the whole series. So I have the steps. I have the stamps, the booklet filled out, and then the bond. That's the succession I want.
Oh, sounds good.
Yeah.
Did they have Christmas seals in New Zealand?
Sure they did.
Yes, I believe they did.
Well, I've got a box upstairs which I went through last year, which has got a couple of thousand New Zealand covers in it, and I was pulling out all sorts of unusual things for a collection and for a display, but I never looked at the Christmas seals. I'll have to have another look through those 2,000 covers, and that'll keep me happy for a couple of days.
It sure will.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Oh,
If I
Bob, now
find
that I
it,
got my
I'll let you
half
know at the
cent,
next meeting.
just to say, Bob, now that I got my half cent small queen with an airmail on it, I guess I got to look for a small queen postal history with Christmas stamps, don't I?
You'll be out of luck there, Garfield, unless it's a very late usage of your small queen.
or an early usage of a seal.
Yeah, that would be good. I'll see if I can rig one up for you.
Oh, thank you. What did you say was the earliest known use of a seal?
In Canada,
1908. 1908. That's 10 years out of period. So
yeah,
bummer.
You guys may have covered this, but are there do people forge Christmas seals?
we haven't seen any yet, but some of them are getting a little bit pricey, especially the local seals. I'm waiting to see some of those ones from Saskatchewan forged. Something I didn't mention on that seal. Mine's a little unique because the overprint is inverted. I meant to mention that as we were going through the slides, but I forgot that. So there's two varieties in that seal, and I can see where they can be forged. We'll be sending them to Garfield for expertising.
Well, they'll probably start coming in tomorrow.
There are forgeries of some of the early perforations on the early Danish seals. I know that. Okay. And there's supposed roulette head and supposed perf this, that, and the other. And you have to do a lot of research to confirm what you've really got.
Well,
measure the distance between this, that, and the other thing.
Before you buy the expensive stamp, buy the book.
Yeah.
Right.
Unfortunately, technology is so advanced now that it's not too difficult to produce something that's not real, or to alter a real item to something unique.
Well, that's where Garfield comes in.
That's what we're every Wednesday we're playing at that down at the Green Foundation, and there's some wonderful fakes and forgeries out there, and they're very well done. So as I say, buy the book and study your material. Know what you're buying before you lay out your money for it. Knowledge is the king.
When Keith did his talk, he was saying about some stamps that had some great provenance owned by some really significant people. Turned out like 40 years later to be declared forgeries.
Well, there's one that's pictured on quite early in the Boggs book of the Canada #3, the 12 penny black on cover. And the first edition of Boggs, it's listed as being the finest known copy. And in the Quarterman reprint, it's declared as being a forgery. And we had that at the Green, I guess, 3 years ago. The cover was submitted to us, and there's no question it's a forgery, but it's an absolutely wonderful piece of work. But it's certainly not worth the $200,000 that people thought it was worth.
Well, I've been taking them. So I had a company that did hyperspectral imaging with Bob Markovitz. I'm not sure if you remember him. We invested in that. So we got into using the spectrometer, similar to what you guys have, but from the DoD, to look at some stamps and covers. And Keith, I've been doing it with Keith because he has a lot of them. And it was amazing because there's some that people have really just said, no, this is definitely a forgery. And I look at the scientific data, I look at the spectrography of ink. I did the test on the ink content, and, I'm like, okay, I don't see it, but it's really interesting how expertising is done. And that's another topic we should probably.
Well, one of the fascinating things, Joan, is that, we get 5 to 7 people on the expert committee looking at an item, and we may get 5 to 7 different opinions, beyond just genuine and fake. But if it's a fake, we want to know why it's a fake and how it was done and who did it if we can. And it's not at all uncommon for us to hold that particular item over for 2 or 3 meetings and review it at each of those 2 or 3 meetings before we do issue an opinion on it. They're tough, and the work is just so good that it's tough to make a decision.
Hey,
Even
maybe
with-
we could do
even
something
with
like
science.
Survivor with your philatelic sessions. I think it was-
I'm sorry.
there's a show called Survivor where they film all these turbulences, and maybe we should do that with these controversial stamps.
Yeah, some of them are real good.
Well, between Garfield and Ken Pugh, your guest last month, I think they could do a hell of a presentation.
Yeah, imagine that we could do a whole program on how to fool Garfield.
Well, that's not hard to do.
You can fool Garfield, but you can't fool the VGG 1000.
One of the things we said since we got that VSC 6000 is,
Or VSC, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you can run, but you can't hide.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, I'm going to stumble upon a test that's going to, prove the case one way or the other.
How do you deal with the potential forgeries of an administration which produces its overprints on stamps with the office laser printer? Because I know that I have seen videos which indicate that one particular administration has been doing that.
I have no idea where we would start with that. No idea whatsoever. I guess the trick would be, first of all, to find out what kind of a laser they're using.
Yes.
Because desktop lasers and commercial lasers are both pretty darn good these days. The technology for use at home has become rather spectacularly good. And we're seeing a number of attempts at fakes and forgeries using very sophisticated lasers and inkjet printers. And one of the real giveaways is you get into the big magnification, and if they're using an inkjet, either a laser or an inkjet, and they forget to convert it to black only, they end up with colored overspray. So, we had a lovely example of a stamp that was submitted to us last week. Estimated value was $100,000, and I only blew it up to 20 times, and you could. The stamp was a black only. It was the Canada 12 penny black, but golly, this had sprinkles of red and green dots in it, which is a pretty good indicator that it was done on a very high resolution scanner and inkjet printer.
If they had done it in black, might it have fooled you?
Nope. I say that with a lot of confidence because there's always going to be some overspray.
Yes, yeah.
And that's the nature of the beast when a laser, the laser sprinkles the powder on the surface and it's electrostatically held and then thermally melted. But there's always going to be a little bit of overspray. So you can spot the little speckles all over the place. And generally you can catch that at about 10 times magnification.
Yes, yeah.
Which is a good little glass like this. That'll pick it up.
Yes, yes. Can I ask one question about laser against inkjet when you're actually doing your own stamps? What's always concerned me is that if I was to use a laser, is there any danger that the ink could come off on the protector that's continually covering the stamps? But it doesn't seem to be a problem with inkjets.
I think that you will see some transference of overspray onto your anything that's been plasticized or
yes.
So this would be your Howard mounts, and if you're using protective sleeves for exhibits and so on, you could end it with some transference. I only use an inkjet.
Yes. That's why I always use inkjets, because I've always been worried about that. Thank you very much. It's nice to talk to an expert about that.
I'm not an expert there yet, but I took the course at the Rochester Institute of Technology, and it's a fascinating course on.
Well, that's an expert in our field in terms of all of us here, isn't it? Thank you very much.
Hey, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you.
And to put in a plug for Garfield, I think Garfield is speaking in February on this medium on the post office or postal history of Toronto.
Yep.
Which will be very interesting.
Thank you, everyone. It's great to have such wonderful speakers.
Well, I know it's very late for me staying up this long, but I have a system. I have a system when we have these meetings. I go to bed at 8:30, set the clock for 10:30, and then come down to watch the meeting so I can watch it reasonably freshly and not lose too much sleep at night.
Where are you, Richard?
I'm in Lincolnshire in Great Britain.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Nice to have you with us.
Yeah.
Well, it's always a pleasure to come on these meetings.
I like the chat afterwards because you get to really talk to people and find out, all the questions that you don't really want to ask in a formal setting. It's really nice. And I get to edit it all out at the end. So.
Well,
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I think it is about time I went to bed. And also, you might have seen him at one stage in this presentation, but I've got a cat which really wants his supper. And at one stage, he was round the back of my head. I don't know whether anybody spotted him, but he definitely wants his supper now, so I must go.
I just want to close it. The discussion of forgeries. I think I want to just go with the attitude that it's all a sunk cost. The money I spent on the collecting is money I didn't spend on chocolate, which was going to make me fat anyway. I expect no return whatsoever off of it. It was just a pleasure, and if it turns out I got fooled, then maybe I was too eager or was too willing to pay too much for it. But that's why I'm content right now with a scan with a download of that $25 bond, because it's just more than I want to spend for that thing until it's a later time, and it has nothing to do with the bond. It has something to do with completing the story. That's the only reason I would want it. So I keep the money out of it.
But Edward, I think the money sneaks in there a little bit, because if you buy something and then you find out you're fooled afterwards, don't you really get a little pissed off that somebody got the upper hand on you and not fairly?
Well, then I'll just call it a copy of a Rembrandt, not the Rembrandt.
Yeah.
And to say it's still if it's a good enough copy of the Rembrandt, it's worth looking at.
Well,
yeah, I mean, it's the cost of education, really.
Yeah.
But that's why I like the expertisers when you have serious money. And, you should be doing, I always tell people, you do stamps because you like them. And, the people who go into it thinking they're going to do stamps as an investment, I'm not sure if it really works out that way.
No.
You got to read page 8 of Boggs' first book. Anyhow, on page 8, he says, if you're collecting for any other reason than your personal satisfaction, you're wasting your time. And if you're collecting for money, you'll be surely disappointed.
Yep.
Look around you and see how many rich stamp dealers you know.
Yeah. What is that saying? How do you make a fortune in stamps? A small fortune in stamps? You start out with a big one, right?
Yep.
I do know someone who was very lucky. He was a bad investor. He lost all his money in all the bonds and stocks. Turns out his collection, he's selling it off slowly, is actually what's funding his retirement. So he was lucky in his collecting because he only collected things that he wanted, and it turns out people want them now.
Well, there's that wonderful story about Mike Smith and from Tennessee, who went to the American Philatelic Society, and looking through the approval books, he was looking for watermarked large queens, and found a nice 2-cent watermarked large queen and sent it up to us at the Green Foundation, and we declared that it was the genuine third known example of the 2-cent large queen in laid paper. And he turned a $65 investment into a $215,000 sale. Nice, a nice day. Knowledge is power.
Yeah. When the gods smile on you, you just say, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Well,
thank everybody. I really thank you for joining us in December. And I'm not going to stop you. If you want to keep chatting, we can, because it's always fun. But I want to make sure everyone has a happy holiday.
well, Joan, on behalf of Cliff and myself and Andrew, of course, we really appreciate you inviting us tonight. It was fun. I don't get that big a chance to talk about Christmas seals, other than between Cliff and Andrew and myself. So that was a pleasure tonight. I was overwhelmed by the people that attended from right across the world. That was amazing as far as I'm concerned. I enjoyed doing it. Thanks so much.
Oh, you're really welcome. And thank you for having speakers, and you guys just, you did a great job. And I look at it as when I see something and I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. That's really interesting. Because I think living with Keith, I get it all, but I was like, oh, this should be fun for everybody. So it was really nice.
From my own perspective, this is a presentation that initially I wasn't going to register for, because it has no direct relationship to what does interest me. However, I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I thank both Cliff and Bob for presenting something that's out of the ordinary in such a professional manner with some very, very nice material, and for one, educated me. And also, I'd like to give thanks to all the other attendees who are far different in their personalities, and really this whole presentation has digressed from Christmas seals or seals to discussing forgeries, books, and many other things that are branches of a tree. And collecting anything philatelic is a big trunk, and it always grows branches which sprout smaller branches and smaller branches, and we all get a great deal of enjoyment from, at some point, pruning the branches because it gets too much. So Cliff and Bob, thank you very, very much.
Thank you for joining us, and have a happy holiday, and we'll see you in January, hopefully.
You will, definitely. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.